This video can be viewed as an entire video, or you can just use it by viewing 1 or 2 slides. So please feel comfortable to use the video in any way that suits you. What is visualizing? Visualizing is making pictures to help us learn. We make these pictures in our minds and we make them in drawings. Some people see pictures in their minds as they read, and other people just have a black screen, and that's okay. We do need to make our learning visual so that it moves from our short-term memory to our long-term memory. So here's an example of visualizing in our minds. He wandered along the path in a leafy forest. Visualize the forest in your mind. And so people who are good at making pictures in their minds actually see a forest as they visualize. But what if we cannot visualize? What do we do if we cannot visualize? We read on, or we find some images so that we can really visualize what's going on. If you have enough prior knowledge about what forests look like, you will keep reading. But if you need more information, you will do a forest Google Images search. It's very important to make things visual to understand them better. Here's an explanation of the water cycle, but I'm finding this really difficult to understand. It'll be easier for me if this water cycle is actually visual. So I'm going to search for water cycle in Google Images so that I can visualize the water cycle. And here it is in a flowchart. And I'm finding that so much easier to understand. So when you've read some facts about history, maybe, a whole lot of events and a whole lot of words, what you can do first, if you want to, is make some notes about what happened. But certainly feel free to make a timeline, and then you'll be able to study for a test with not so many words, and it's visual, so it's easy to understand. Another thing you can do after reading is make visual notes. They're just such a really good way to capture what you've learned. You draw some pictures and basically you put some labels, and it really helps your brain to process what you've read. Other people call visual notes sketch notes. A trick with sketch notes is that you kind of put little frames around the different aspects of the topic that you've been reading, so that you don't get all the parts of the topic muddled up together. Another really good thing that you can draw up all by yourself when you've just read a factual text is a fuller scaffold. You can just have 2 columns at the top of the page and a section down the bottom for visual notes. So on the left column, you actually put headings from the factual text, because headings actually carry the main ideas. And for each one of those headings, you can put 1 to 2 fascinating facts in the right-hand column. So I really like the fuller scaffold, and you can draw that up yourself whenever you need to. Something that's really fun to draw after reading a story is to draw a story map, which just shows the adventures of the character along the way. So here's a sample story map. It's got a few things actually. It shows the characters, it's showing a theme visually, and it's showing the setting visually. So it's a really cool way to remind yourself of what the story was about. This is another style of story map that you can write into to visualize the events in the story. So this is a book snap, which is a really good way of capturing fascinating facts when you've read a non-fiction book and you really loved something you've learned about. So basically you photograph a quote from the book, you add a related emoji that explains how you're feeling about it, and you explain your reaction. So I think book snaps are a really fun way of visualizing important information that you have just learned. They're quick, they're fun, and they're highly visual. Similarly, when you've been reading a novel, you basically take a photo of a quote from the novel that you think is fantastic, or it might be boring, or it might be puzzling, whatever it is. You take a picture of it, and then you add in some pictures and an emoji, and you remind yourself of what it was that that captivated you when you read it. So you can use jagged speech bubbles if you feel excited. You can make sure that you always put the book cover on your BookSnap. You can make sure that you provide page numbers for the bits that you're quoting. It's just a really good way to connect with your reading. Sketch quotes are fun as well. That's basically where you do a drawing around a quote from the book that really intrigues you, and then you explain why it is that you chose the quote. So sketch quoting is really good for people who like to do drawing. So how do you choose the things that you want to quote about? Well, there's a million reasons, but here's a list for you that you can come back to later. Reasons that you might want to do a sketch quote. Book bentos are another really fun thing to do to visualize your reaction to a novel. So basically, you get a rectangle and you put a book into the middle of it, and then you surround it with objects that you've chosen that are very significant or symbolic in the story. So it's kind of a way of visually capturing the themes of the book. It's called a book bento because it's kind of a bit like the sort of food containers that are used in Japanese meals. So here are some more book bentos, and it's just a great way to visually capture what you associate with the book. So as a writer, what do you want to do in terms of helping your reader to visualize? Well, when you're writing stories, you want to make sure that you've got some really good descriptive writing so that your reader can visualize your characters, settings, and events. And in non-fiction, when you're writing something that's factual, make sure that you include illustrations, photographs, diagrams, flowcharts, maps, and timelines so that your reader can really visualize the topic clearly.